Consistent self-improvement, everybody. You're now listening to American gypC Podcast. I'm your host, Classic, and I'm here with my co-host,
gypC, and today we have Dr. Vineet Nair. He is a family physician, entrepreneur, and author of Healthier You, a family doctor's guide to the fundamentals of better living. Welcome to the show, Dr.
Welcome.
Vineet.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
To get started, I'd like to ask, where are you from? Tell us a little bit about, where you're from and where you live now and how you got into what you practice today.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I'm a family doctor. I'm in Ontario. I'm in London, Ontario. It's kind of like in between Toronto and Detroit, if you're looking on the map there.
Okay.
But I was born and raised on the East Coast in New Brunswick and the Maritime provinces. And then went into med school out in Vancouver and the West Coast. And I kind of ended up in the middle here in Ontario. Was drawn to family medicine, I guess, as a career choice within medicine, really because I like the big picture when it comes to health. I didn't like any one thing, enough to justify spending 5-6 years studying it. So I kind of liked having that broad scope of knowledge and kind of having that big picture when it comes to health. And so that's what kind of drew me to it, like the relationships within family medicine. And I really have enjoyed my career in that even more than I thought I would have at the start, to be honest. But I think I kind of got into the whole idea of looking at health, I guess, more on that big picture side of things, just because I got, I guess, a bit interested in how people are always so worried about their health, but they seem to sometimes be worried about the wrong stuff. I see so much time people are spending and worrying about stuff that really doesn't make that big of a difference in their health. So I wanted to kind of help refocus that to be more on those things that have the biggest impact. So that's what led to writing the book. But it still also influences how I practice in general every day.
Okay.
So when you say they're usually worried about the wrong stuff, what are some of the common things that you see people worry about?
I mean, they're all real things, and they're totally justifiable. I don't want to say it's like people are kind of needlessly anxious, but in family medicine, a lot of it is reassurance, right? We spend a lot of time kind of reassuring the worried well that what they have is not a symptom of cancer, it's not a heart attack, it's not any number of things that they're worried about, and we kind of want to make sure and do the tests and do the exams and take the history to determine that yes, you have this symptom, but it's not a heart attack, it's not cancer, it's not a pneumonia or what have you, right? So that's where the concern comes from. But then I see a lot of people that are trying to be healthy because they want to be healthy, and they kind of will focus on things that maybe isn't the most important thing when I look at them as a physician looking at them in their health, right? They'll be looking at, I want to be healthy, so I started taking this supplement, but they're still smoking, or they're not exercising at all, or they're still eating a bad diet. Like those kind of things I think are, we only have so much time in our lives to focus on our health. Like we're all busy, we have stuff to do. And you want to spend that time when you're thinking about trying to do something for your health. I would think you'd want to do it on stuff that has the biggest impact, will make the biggest difference for yourself.
What do you feel like are some of those things that we should focus on that would make a bigger impact?
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of this. It's the common sense stuff, to be honest. I mean, I think it's one of those things where if I asked anybody, list the top 10 things you could do to be healthy, I would hope that everybody's list would be kind of the same, right? I think we kind of all know those kind of basic things that, grandmother, mother medicine that we kind of know, but we just kind of forget. And we think that we know so much more about science and medicine now that we should be doing something more complicated or more fancy or more sexy, right? Like we got to do gene therapy or genetically testing to something and getting more tests done and more things otherwise. So I think that's kind of where it came from. That was kind of where this whole book thing came from. Like I remember my wife and I were leaving on a holiday, and I was kind of rushing around to, get out the door as you do before a holiday. And we kind of got onto the plane and sitting just relaxing. And I was kind of saying this whole thing that, they're worried about the wrong stuff. It's kind of frustrating. My wife was kind of like, all right, Mr. Big Shot, then what should they be worried about, right? So we kind of literally just sat on the plane and just made a little list of things on our little piece of paper there and made a little waiting room poster just to put up just to remind people about those things, right? And so it kind of came down to that. But it's still the big things, right? It's like, what you're putting in your body, you're eating, you're moving, you're sleeping. How do you enjoy your life the best? How do you quit smoking? Can you find ways to sleep better? Then to talk about some of the interventional stuff like screening tests, vaccinations. And then at the end of it all, you could think about, supplementation with something if you felt that was something you wanted to do. But when I go even beyond that, though, if you look in my book, it's about the first two things are think and change. And I think that's where the fundamental start kind of comes from, like starting to critically think about what do you want to achieve when you're talking about being healthy? Like, what does that mean to you? What is your ultimate goal? And how do you get there? And how do you analyze all this crazy information we get all the time about health, and how do you find a way to kind of navigate that to some degree so you feel like you have something to hang your hat on that you can move forward confidently.
But like the eating part is getting
Yeah,
so confusing right now because
yeah,
I do a lot of research on that just to figure out like what's the best thing for me, and there's so much research on everything, so it's like you
yeah.
don't know which way to go.
Yeah, and I think that's totally understandable. I think I get confused all the time too, and I think I'm not a dietitian. I'm not
Right.
I don't give people specific diets to follow. So for me, it was kind of just trying to figure out what are those big principles. Again, I'm a big picture guy. What are the big principles that kind of can you use to help guide you, whatever kind of diet you want to follow? Because you can say lots of things that will be you'll read about, but practically speaking, it won't be possible for you or for someone else, right? So, there are some fundamentals I think that still play a role no matter what kind of diet you choose, right? I mean, it depends on what your goal is. I mean, if it's weight loss, it's one thing. If it's just being healthy, it's another. But I mean, in terms of weight loss, I think it still comes down to calories in, calories out is still a fundamental thing that really does make a difference. And all the different diets do tend to still target that. They just do it in different ways, and they may not advertise that, right? I mean, if you're talking about intermittent fasting, if you're eating less hours per day, you're likely going to eat less calories. If you're talking about a low carb, high protein diet, protein tends to be more filling, so you tend to eat fewer calories as a result of that. If you're really restricting your diet in terms of just eating specific foods, because you're giving yourself less choice, you're going to eat less calories. Like, so all those things kind of, that fundamental thing that it has to be, no matter what you do, if you want to lose weight, less calories is still important. And then it's still like those, again, it's mom medicine kind of stuff, right? Just eating mainly whole foods, things that you can prepare yourself, that you're cooking rather than buying at a store that's overly processed, just because you can control that, what's going into it, what's going into it kind of thing. So, yeah, so I try to avoid kind of getting to specific diets, but I think just some fundamentals are important, like that whole thing about calories. Find your lowest low hanging fruit, like, avoiding excessive calories through alcohol or other kind of, pops and sodas and that kind of stuff. And then trying to find a diet that you can sustain, because if you can't do it for the long haul, it's just not feasible. I mean, I think I'm always amazed at how much people are willing to suffer and put themselves through crazy things for 3 months, 4 months. They'll eat they'll go follow these really intense diets that are really restrictive, and I could never do that. And so they do it for that period of time, and they'll lose some weight and they'll feel better, maybe, or maybe not, and then they'll go off that diet, right? So I think that's the sustainability part is a huge part of whatever diet you're choosing to follow.
Yeah. To kind of go back to the part where you were saying people worry too much. A lot of times when you turn on the TV and if you watch the news, they're going to give you a crazy list of things to worry about and to be afraid of. How responsible is like TV and social media for like the average person's health out here when it comes to saying what is possibly almost healthy and 5 years later this isn't healthy type
yeah
of thing?
I think that goes down to that critical thinking and be able to analyze some of those things as it comes in, and I think we do hear tons of claims coming in all the time about health and trying to be afraid of this. When you hear about it, it does sound scary. I mean, we all remember the cases of cancer in your family or in friends, and it kind of gets on your mind. Or if someone has a heart attack, I think, is this chest pain now a heart attack for me? And those things are all, the more you hear about it, the more you think about it. I mean, that's the common joke in medical school, right? Everybody in medical school thinks that no matter what subject we're studying, we all have those same diagnoses as we're going through it, right? Like, that's like, oh crap, that's talking about me now, and I'm talking about bipolar disorder or about irritable bowel. That's like, oh, I guess I have that now. So just the more you hear about it, the more it does get in your head. But in terms of like, the things you hear about in terms of what's good for you, what's bad for you, I mean, I think having some sort of framework to think about that is important. And what I kind of go through is sort of like, one is just what is the actual claim that they're trying to make here? Like, sometimes you'll hear stuff, oh, this is good for me. Like, but what does that mean? Like, good for what, right? That's really not very helpful, saying it's good for you. Is it going to help me, reduce my risk of cancer? Is it going to help me live longer? Is it going to help me, grow more hair? Is it going to help me lose weight? Like, what is the actual claim that they're making there? Good enough is just not good enough. You can't just say it's just healthy and just leave it at that. You got to be more specific. Sure. And then I think you have to think about, like, what is the actual, we talk about, like, in testing for medicine, we talk about this thing called the pre-test probability. Like, if you order a test, every test has a chance of being wrong just based on errors in the test. And so you got to think, before you even order the test, like, what's the likelihood of thinking this is going to be a positive test, or it's going to mean something, or is it just a mistake, right? And the classic example is a pregnancy test. you give that to a guy, if it comes back positive, it's pretty darn clear that the test is wrong, right? For the most part, you're pretty darn sure of that, right? So it's not a very useful test. So I think if you hear a claim that doesn't fit in with anything else that we know about with health, like of everything we've known for ever, and all of a sudden someone says something that makes no sense from what we know about science and how the world works, then it requires a ton of evidence to turn over that to make that belief accepted in the medical community and in the community at large, right? So I think that's kind of getting not just looking at everything in isolation, but how does it fit in with the bigger puzzle of what we know about the body and the health of us all already? And then you can kind of look at things a bit more in terms of what's the actual basis of the claim? Like, why are they thinking this is true? Is it because, some celebrity said so, or is it because there's really good evidence and studies about it? Or is it because they said it's been done for thousands of years, so it must be good? Or it's because some other, it's natural, so it must be good. So these other claims are out there that don't have as much validity as those really strong scientific studies. So when it comes to trying to be healthier, though, I think it's going to be pretty hard pressed to get better than not smoking, eating a healthy diet, exercising regularly for those kind of basic things. I mean, this is talking about trying to be healthy in the grand scheme of things, not about dealing with a specific illness or diagnosis, obviously. But yeah.
I had a question there, but I think I lost it a little bit.
No worries.
Apologies. Go ahead.
That's right. What do you guys find are challenging for you when you kind of think about health in general? Like, you hear, lots of things. What are you trying? What do you do when you're trying to be healthier?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Apologize. You mentioned natural, and there are, as far as with holistic doctors and basically certified doctors, why is there kind of like almost you want to say that naturally there's a less trust with holistic doctors versus I guess certified doctors, right? And there's this basically the study is still there that even from the proof of what they do is still there. Why is there still that distrust there?
I think it depends you have to get into it a bit deeper, right? I mean, I think we always kind of say that if it works, we will do it. Like, it's not like we have any, like, I don't really care. Like, if something works to help a patient, it doesn't matter to me if it's, a herbal product or a prescription drug or a surgery or what have you, right? But if the evidence is all there to show that the medication works better, that there's not a lot of evidence on the herbal side of things, then we have to kind of question that, right? And so I think that's where we kind of have a certain level of standard that we kind of have to we are obliged to do. Like, we have to say, these are the risks, these are the benefits, this is the evidence for it, this is why we think this would be recommended for you. I don't know if there's that much confidence in the others on that kind of natural quote unquote side. And the idea that natural is always good is not really a valid evidence, right? It's still lots of things that are natural can kill us, right? And lots of things that are natural are also not as well regulated when they're processed. We don't know. We can't always guarantee what's in them, or we can't always guarantee, what is the active ingredient in that. So anytime you talk about something, it's very specific on the actual condition. You have to really kind of look at what you're trying to treat. But you don't want to be taking something that has less evidence and not taking something that has better evidence, especially if you're treating an illness that has significant health consequences. In our mind, we want to kind of make sure that that's treated to the best we can. I don't want to say there's animosity there. I think it's more just giving people full information, right? I mean, I think if people hear our point of view or their point of view, and it's hopefully the same point of view, just like, this is the evidence for what would work the best for your condition based on the evidence that we know. This is the pros and the cons. These are your choices, and the patient ultimately decides. I mean, I don't ever kind of think that it's up to me to say, you have to do this, and if you don't, you're not my patient anymore, right? It's always kind of like, these are the options. This is the pros, this is the cons. These are the choices you have. What do you want to do? That's kind of how I look at treating my patients anyway.
Over the past 2 years, we all can agree that there's been a lot going on in the health industry altogether, or the medical industry altogether.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on kind of how things were going before, and then the view on what is considered healthy now, or even just how everything was, how the process was even handled for the healthy person. Because we're in California, so we get a lot of sun.
Yeah.
So, and we exercise often as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Healthy people, and we haven't, seen anything as far as I had anything. We haven't been sick probably in the past 5 years since we've been here. So
right.
What is even, what's your opinion on how things have played out over these past 2 years?
I mean, do you mean just in general, or around this whole COVID-19 pandemic we're living through, and we're trying to figure out what's next for us?
Yes.
All of that. I mean, I think it's a complicated thing, right? There's so many factors involved. I don't want to say that I have all the information or the best person to talk about. I'm not a public health physician. I'm not a infectious disease physician, but obviously I've been involved with our handling of things here in my community. I think things were changing, and we're getting new information constantly. Like, it's been pretty amazing how much has happened in terms of from the isolation of the virus to getting vaccines out to people, and then the vaccine, gets the variants of change, and that has different effectiveness on the vaccine. So there's lots of moving pieces here, obviously, right? So no, I think there's a lot of factors. I think things have been done better in some ways, for sure, in terms of communication. I think absolutely. I think we're always trying to do better with that, and some people have been better at it. Some areas have done better with that. But it's a balancing act, because you're balancing public health, which is just all about giving people the best chance to be healthy and being equal across the board for everybody to be healthy. And then you got politics and government, where they're trying to manage businesses that have to survive, because public health doesn't always think about all of that aspect. They do try to, but it's out of their jurisdiction a lot of times. But they have to balance the business side of things, and how to keep people working and keep people getting income, and all those kind of things. So it's been hard, and there's going to be different changes depending on where you are, because I think we're in Canada, so we didn't have a lot of choice to just meet family outside for the winter months, right? So that was a challenge for people to be either super isolated and not being able to see their families, or risking exposure, and being in small groups or larger groups indoors was not a great thing back then. So it's been a complicated time, for sure, and I think we're all just trying to do the best we can with the information we had at the time. But I truly believe that, certainly from the medical side of things, we've all been trying to work our butts off, trying to figure out the best way to help people get through this with the least people getting sick, right? Because I think you just hear enough stories of people that had it and obviously succumbed to the virus. You're trying to do everything you can to reduce even one case is a good thing, right? But it's a challenge. You're balancing pros and cons in so many levels when it's a global pandemic that affects literally everything and everybody, right? So it is still a tough time to try to figure out the right path through all this.
Yeah, with some of the information that was given, or a lot of the information that a lot of people got, and it mostly comes through the news. What are some of the trust issues that people may have now with trusting what comes from the news versus what to believe in versus what they're seeing with their own eyes about certain health things, even dealing with the vaccine or other medications.
I think that's always been a challenge for everybody, right? I think there's a lot of challenge with messaging when you're dealing with these complicated issues. People have really strong feelings about. I think it's been hurt. I think still there's a lot of people that are going to be really hesitant with any recommendations for public health and government for the foreseeable future. But it also comes down to, honestly, a bit of culture too, right? I mean, I think in Canada we tend to, for the most part, trust our systems. I mean, certainly there's a local part too, but for the most part, we do trust our systems, and people do tend to follow the rules when people are asked to. There's still a vocal minority that don't, or that are upset about it. But for the most part, we do. I think other places, I think the U.S., I think you are very independent minded. There's a lot of questioning, and that from what we see from the other side of the border. I think there is a difference in some of those things. So I can't comment too much on that aspect of things, but I do agree that we have certainly seen the effects of social media on messaging, on people kind of hearing the same messages from their silos in their social media community, and not really stretching out beyond that. And that was the case before COVID as well, right? I mean, you would still see people people always tend to read things and listen to things that confirm what they already believe. That's always been the case. And even if I try to read an article that goes against something that I know I believe the opposite, it's hard for me to get through that article. I want to just flip it to something else. It's just uncomfortable, right? So that's always the case. We all have this confirmation bias where we tend to listen and hear things that agree with what we already think. And I think social media really feeds into that.
I know you had a chapter on vaccination and like child immunization and things like that, and I don't have a kid, but that's one thing that I've looked into because I know there's, even before COVID, there was hesitancy in general with people feeling like there's a lot more. It's just more and more vaccines being added to, I guess, to go to school or to
just be a part of society.
Right.
Yeah.
And people feel like it's also causing other health issues, whether it be autism and things like that. Do you have?
Yeah. I have strong feelings on that, and the chapter is still everything that I believe in that, and even with COVID vaccines coming out, it's still pretty darn applicable to all of the things that came out in COVID. This is not all the stuff that came out during COVID vaccine hesitancy and concerns were all the same things that were there before COVID came out, right? So. And those are all common concerns we hear. And I think whenever I hear families that come in with questions about the vaccination program, I try to really be specific and try to figure out what specific concerns they have. Again, because there's so many things out there, I don't know which concern they're worried about, right? Because I could start talking about one that was never even on their mind, right? So, but yeah, the whole purpose of vaccination, right, is to allow the body's natural immune system to create defenses against these illnesses before you even get them, right? So. Traditionally, you would get sick, you would get antibodies against the illness, and then you would be immune to it. You wouldn't be able to get it again. But you have to first get the illness and survive it to get to that point, right? So we want to get ahead of that game, right? So that's what the whole vaccination program is about: is to give these vaccines before the child has a chance to be exposed to them, so they can get the immunity before they get exposed to even once. They don't have to take the risk of getting chickenpox, meningitis, what have you, right? So that's the rationale. So that's why. The more we can get, theoretically, the better. Your body can handle it. We have a very powerful immune system. It's pretty darn amazing what we can do with it. And it's been shown time and time again that we can handle all these vaccinations. And even as we do these things, just remember that we're giving just portions of these. Most of these vaccines are just a small portion of the virus itself, right? It's just like a few proteins on it. So it's how many antigens or how many triggers are there to create antibodies. So by having the vaccine, you're getting far smaller numbers of, or I guess, induction of the immune response because you're not getting exposed to that many proteins. Your body can handle way more than that, and it's really been it's really a miracle of what we've been able to do with vaccinations and how we've eradicated so many illnesses, and we don't see them more. My career, there's so many things I've never seen before. Like I've never seen measles. I've never seen. I guess I've seen chickenpox maybe once or twice, but that's about it, right?
You mean when you personally having it yourself, or you?
No, in my practice, like in my work life, in my residency, my training, like I don't see these things. You don't have them. When you talk to older docs that have been through, that was their pediatric rotation was just like floors of patients with all of these illnesses, right? We forget, right? We forget how well they work that we don't see them anymore. So now when you hear about measles outbreaks, for a lot of us docs, if we had a measles outbreak, that'd be the first time we see it because we never seen it before because everyone's been vaccinated before. So. We forget how we have recency bias as well. We don't remember how it was before that there were all these illnesses that we don't have to deal with anymore. So I think, bottom line, they're safe and they work, I think is the biggest thing I keep on telling patients. It's the most monitored thing we've done. We vaccinate, as we vaccinate literally like billions of people a year. Every year we vaccinate kids, we just vaccinated, whatever it was, 8 billion people with the 7 billion, whatever it was, we vaccinated with COVID-19 vaccine. We have ample evidence of its safety. We know exactly what's going on with these things, and it's been remarkably safe for the COVID vaccine and the other vaccines. Again, all of those risks that we've mentioned about autism, that's been disproven. It's just the stories still hang around. So
But
it's unfortunate.
the medical industry does have a long history of side effects with things, and it's hard to imagine, even for the general public, that there could be something that is meant for everyone, and it's rolled out, and in a kind of fast amount of time. There are certain like concerns that are from dealing with certain like protein spikes and myocarditis and things that are out there that raise some types of alerts, dealing with it. And you mentioned even like chicken pox and things. I remember having chicken pox myself. Yep. And it's not necessarily, I can't say it's a lethal illness.
Well, you survived it though. You survived it, right?
But I survived
can't talk to people that died. The people that died aren't here to talk about it, right? So that's survivorship bias there. We only hear people that have survived the illness and got through it. We don't hear from people that have not survived it or have been seriously ill by it. So we have to remember that, because that is a common fallacy that we have in our heads. We always think about that.
But do you know anybody personally that has had chicken pox that has not been vaccinated and has survived it?
But that's not relevant to the question, though, right? So
it's a part of the study.
Anecdotal evidence is not. No, it's not, though. Anecdotal evidence is not valuable, right? If I have a story where one patient had a side effect to a drug, and I say, well, I'm never going to use that drug again, but that drug works 99% of the time, and I happen to have that one person, that's bad medicine. You no longer offer that product.
Right, but what if that's not the case with just 1%? What if it's more than 1%?
But we have evidence, though, right? Like we have, but these are being studied routinely. We check. We have these systems in place to look at chickenpox vaccines. Every vaccine we have to look for side effects. We're not going to give people vaccines that are going to hurt kids. We're here to help people, right? I'm not like, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about vaccines because it can get pretty heated and people can get.
Right. We're not right. We're not going to get heated.
Not heated,
it's just an educated conversation.
But I do want to say though that at the end of the day, we're all working to help people. Like, there's nothing in it for me to give a vaccine to a kid. Like, I get paid $2 to do it. Not even. I think I lose money because it doesn't cover the cost of needles and stuff. There's nothing in it for me. Yeah, but public health wise, we know on a population level, this does help the population, right? This is population health, which is a fundamental part of public health, is trying to improve the health of the public, protect them all as much as we can.
Right, but we also have people that live lives that it don't necessarily reflect. That's what we see that comes from that industry. I just a couple of years had an uncle that passed of diabetes, and they never rushed out to give out free insulin. So we question things in the society that we live in. That when things happen a certain way, and we're looking at something with our own eyes, and we're being told one thing, it's hard. Gotcha. It's hard.
No. The trust is a huge thing. And again, I think there are fundamental. I have to say, there's going to be fundamental differences in a Canadian's experience with the healthcare system and the American experience, right? I mean, I don't have any way to compare to that. Like, I can't even.
Because I actually know people personally that has never been vaccinated.
Yeah,
no, I mean like at birth, they've never been vaccinated.
In my practice, I have patients like that.
They've went through.
I don't kick them out of my practice. I'm just saying I try to get them vaccinated, and any program you have,
right? But when it comes to that type of studies, when you're saying this percentage of people, are we looking at the percentage of people that didn't get vaccinated at all and survived all of these illnesses, and now we can maybe look into maybe we don't have to vaccinate the other 99%. We have 1%.
Well, we never do though, right? We always, any successful vaccination program has a number that we need to get to have population and herd immunity, right? So not anyone, but for the traditional ones, right? So there's always going to be some percentage that doesn't get vaccinated. But the reason they're protected is because the people around them are protected, and there's no virus going or the illness going through the community, right? It's like if you're in a crowd with 100 people, 80 of them have umbrellas up and it's raining. Well, the other 20 people are not going to get wet because all the umbrellas are all around them, right? But they're not carrying the umbrella, but the other people are. So we're still looking at. There's always going to be a group that doesn't get vaccinated. We understand that. We're not going to get to 100%. And you don't want to. It's been a weird time where we've had to force and cajole and try to encourage more of this vaccination.
Well, why does it have to be forced?
Well, no, it hasn't been forced, but because you've seen I'm just saying, like, in terms of COVID-19 vaccine, the governments have tried to make incentives to get people to get vaccinated, whether it's restricting travel, restricting this, restricting that, right? So because it has such a huge impact on global spread and community spread and businesses and all that kind of stuff, right? So that was where that encouragement was coming. But because it is a public health thing, right? We're trying to help the most vulnerable. And if it comes to a point where, a child is vulnerable that not all vaccines will work for, right? If they've had leukemia as a kid, they've had chemotherapy, they're on these drugs, the vaccines won't work for that child, and they get exposed to measles or chickenpox, whatever, their likelihood of getting really sick with it is really high. And they're relying on everybody else to get vaccinated to protect them, to reduce their risk of getting exposed to it. So that is the other reality, right? We have patients that if their vaccinations drop and outbreaks come up, they are scared to send their kids to programs and schools because they know their child, if they get sick, they have a high chance of dying or getting serious complications. So it's a lot of factors involved. Public health is a complicated thing. I'm not a public health physician, like I said, but I'm just saying that this is the rationale behind a lot of these programs is to try to protect the most vulnerable.
I understand.
But I mean, I except also, the experience you have in terms of, again, I can't relate to the healthcare system in the U.S. where, like, we don't charge patients here, right? So we don't have people turned away for not being, they come and we see them, we treat them and prescribe things, and there's always something there for them. So that part is hard for me to kind of, culturally figure out how I would even be able to practice in that kind of environment. So, so I can understand if on one hand, if you can't get something so obvious as insulin for something, but you're you're pushing this other thing, like why the difference, right? I can see that kind of confusion, right, or that frustration.
Because as you say, as they say, African Americans supposedly have a high chance of getting diabetes, then why isn't it looked at the same way as this?
No. Yeah, no, I hear you. We see the prices and this challenge with the insulin, and it's always makes us scratch our heads. But again, it's a totally different system, so I can't really relate, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately on my end. But
understood.
I guess before we get ready to close it out, is there anything you want to leave the audience with, where they can find your book, social and things like that?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I'm still a full-time doc. That's what I do. The book thing is kind of something I've just worked on for my own sake to help me have that kind of help me clarify my thoughts myself in my head, so I can kind of have something to share with my patients and broader if there's interest. You can get the book on Amazon, on any kind of online place where you buy your books. You can order it there. My website's VineetNairMD.com. See some samples of the book. That poster I was talking about with some little reminders for how to be healthier are there. But I guess what I would leave people with, I think, would be just the whole idea of being clear on what you mean when you're trying to be healthy. I think for me, it's I think as a physician, I'm always thinking about what's your best chance to age gracefully into your 80s, 90s, or longer, living a healthy life without any serious consequences or complications of illness. Other people may think healthy, and often we get confused by that because the health industry is so big on like six packs and looking a certain way, and I think just that confusion part is really important to clarify, that when you're trying to be healthy, in my mind, it is that kind of giving yourself the best chance to get older, and that is actually a lot easier to do than trying to look like The Rock or look like, say, Jennifer Lopez or whoever the heck you're trying to look like, right? So I think if we keep that goal in mind, that's much more attainable. It's simpler things. It's not always easy, but it is simpler. My mantra kind of is rediscover what matters, focus on what works, and then just relax about the rest and live the healthiest life you can enjoy.
I can agree.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate having you. We appreciate your time and consideration coming in and talk with us and educating us on things.
Yeah.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yep. And if you're ever in Los Angeles, feel free to stop by and have a in studio.
All right. Sounds great.
Yeah.
And for the listeners, you can find the podcast at AmericanGypC.com as well as all podcast platforms. You can find consistent self-improvement merch at luamlee.com. And as always, we'll have all of this information on the description.
And you can also find some relaxing music at Classic, KLACCIK, CARPENTA, on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Tidal, all major platforms, some cello instrumentals, a little vocals, and also some electronic stuff for our YouTube soundtrack. Thank you to our listeners, our viewers, our supporters, our commenters, everybody that donates. We appreciate you. Thank you again. And consistent self-improvement. Peace.